Okay, here we are today for three really quick individual episodes. I wanted to chop these up because I see the attention span on the videos is rather short, and I think this information is really, really very important. So the first in this series started with space, something outside of your control as an individual, something beyond, something that's very interesting for most people. And we've got a core word of an involver right here of DARPA. And then we're going to move into something that is more likely to touch each one of us, especially if you're on a social media platform such as YouTube. You've probably participated in other social media platforms as well, all of which run by algorithms and all of which run artificial intelligence, all of which have received funding and their start from DARPA. So this second episode is going to focus on the social media portion. And then, as I've mentioned, by the third, we're going to talk about how this relates to you, specifically the language used, how robots are trained, and what happens when you're fired by a robot. So let's go ahead and dig into this one. Right now, we've got this article. Again, this is an older article. This is very obvious, although I mention it all the time. People just um, discount it completely. The original conversation started to come up around 2014. Now this article says 2016. This is Time Magazine. Facebook hired a former DARPA head to lead an ambitious new research lab. What new research lab was required at Facebook? Remember, around this time, they were doing a whole bunch of manipulation, how they could get. So let me back up. In order for a startup to get funding, there's two paths that they have opportunities for. One, of course, what we typically know as a small business to big business platform is revenue generation. How much money are you bringing in to cover your costs? You can leverage money through loans and government funds and slowly grow based on a strong foundation. That's not how the tech world works, and that's certainly not how venture capitalists work. They want to run fast and get to the IPO faster. The reason is these are pyramid schemes. You've got people at the bottom who come up with an idea. You've got basic investors, maybe it's called 401k, and then you reach out to friends and family, and then you reach out to what are typically known as angel investors. And then you've got Series A, Series B, Series C, whatever levels of investing there. But all this money has to replace earlier money. Now, if a foundation is being built and the company is in fact growing and paying back those who they've borrowed money from, then all is good. But how many companies have we seen over the last 5-10 years that even at the point of an IPO are not making money? It is a pyramid scheme. And so what we want to look at here is at this time, Facebook was exploring this option. They weren't making money, but they did know that by keeping what's called eyeballs on the page and monitoring how long somebody would spend on a page, how often they would return to the page, how often they would share information from the page, and how often the information that was shared received a click through in order to drive other people to the page to manage the data analytics of that flow as well. As you can see, that this mushrooms out very quickly. It's a lot of data and data manipulation. But this is how Facebook was able to grow and establish their numbers and get more and more funding. Eyeballs, usage, your time. So Facebook hired a former DARPA head to lead an ambitious new research lab. Now, moving forward, we have found out quite a bit about this individual. Her name is Regina Dugan. If you want to get into the social connections, the tech world is one big everybody knows everybody. There's talks about an extreme closeness between her and the CEO, Eric Schmidt, over at Google for a period of time now, but you can tell how everything's intertwined. Regina Dugan attends a Disruptive Innovation Awards during the 2014 Tribeca Film Festival in the Skirball Center for the Performing Arts in New York City. That was 2014. Here, Time Magazine's Victor Luckerson in April So this would have been yesterday, an anniversary of this article. If you need another sign that Facebook's world dominating ambitions are just getting started, here's one. The Menlo Park, California company has hired a former DARPA chief to lead its new research lab. And again, what kind of research in this is this? As it came out, we knew it was psychological manipulation. Now, what's very interesting is I have told people for years, it's building 8. So if you go to the Facebook campus, they've got 2 campuses over there. One is like big metal and glass buildings. That's the newer executive offices. But the core Menlo Park office that they have, which borders East Palo Alto, the community there, is this almost like a Disneyland type of village they've created. It's kind of in a circular fashion. They've got trams that ride the employees around or visitors around. Pretty high security to get in. You can get on the property, but then to get inside, it's really a big neighborhood with games and food and breaks and gyms, everything that you would need for maybe an extended university campus, as an example that all of us would know. Well, right in the center, they had something called Building 8, and Building 8 was DARPA headquarters. And I have mentioned this for years, and people have asked me about it. And here it is, Time Magazine, once again, 2016. Facebook CEO Zuckerberg announced April 14th that Regina Dugan will guide Building 8, again, this is B8, a new research group developing hardware projects that advance the company's efforts in virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, and global connectivity. So those are the overall directions of somebody who was a big data analytics, but how many of us turn to government for a software expertise unless they're deep in the military? Dugan served as the head of, here we go, as head of the Pentagon's Defense Advanced Research Project Agency from 2009 to 2012. Most recently, and that might suggest that she was a government employee appointee, because as we see, the government is a revolving door for many. You've got those who are elected to office, and they're going to serve 2, 4, 6 years. And then they can either be reelected as we see fit, or we've got the group of people who are usually at the executive level, and they're appointed by the administration. And as soon as that administration changes, often those individuals flow out and new policies come in. And then you've got the individuals that are civilian that stack all the government agencies nationwide. Those are the ones that have a lifetime, cradle to grave is as close as we're going to get nowadays. They might work there for 40, 50 years. That's the only job they've ever known. And that executive level of political appointee directs them every 3 to 4 years as to what's going to be the priority, what they're going to focus on. It's really like moving robots. And quite honestly, from my own experience, it is extremely demeaning, because often these executives come in, they have bought the way into the role, and they are not the best person for the job. They often know nothing about the agency, and certainly don't care about the people working there, because they're on a career ladder, and they know that from the moment they take that job, they are looking for their next step back through that revolving door into the corporate world at a very high salary. So here we have an example of that. So again, this is where she came from at the Pentagon. Most recently, she led Google's Advanced Tech and Projects Lab. Here's a connection there, a highly experimental arm of the company responsible for developing new hardware and software products on a strict 2-year time level. So now Google's Advanced Technology Projects Lab is more openly known to as Google X. They are headquartered in a building that is separate from the main campus. They now have an X out front. However, for years it was an undisclosed location. Dugan will bring the same sink or swim mindset to Facebook. This method is characterized by aggressive fixed timelines, extensive use of partnerships with university, There we go. See, there's that DARPA mindset again. Small and large businesses and clear objectives for shipping products at scale. Again, at scale is huge. This isn't about one-on-one small business building. This is about creating a concept, quickly building the software around that concept, and then launching that software in a manner out to the population. So essentially, for lack of a better word, it spreads like a virus at scale without any compromise to the core software. So at scale is a very, very core term within the technology world. The new tech underscores just how far Facebook plans to extend beyond its social media roots. The company made plans at controlling hardware in the past. Remember Facebook Home, the software that transformed on an Android phone into a Facebook-driven mobile experience? That effort flopped. And that's okay. And again, I will let you dig into this. You can go further into what this is. But what is your plan? If you look at your life, I've said this again and again, everybody has a plan. You either have a plan for yourself or someone else has one for you. Now, we've all grown up where, we know we're doing elementary school, we know we're doing middle school, we know we're doing high school, we know we need to go to a university, and then we know we need to pick a career. We've got different benchmarks within that in order to make a success on each level. However, that's often it for most people. Write out the career, go to retirement, move on. And yet government and corporations think out 100 years. In this case, Facebook, which we all know the origins on where it created and how it moved through universities as a social virus, and grew from that level by getting people used to it at a university level, bring it into companies, and then building in addition to the social support that the corporation received, which is essentially social welfare from the government. So what has been the damage as this has grown? And again, this is taxpayer money. This means your money has gone into this. And as we saw in 2016, their research, their information has gone quite deep, all the way into going back where the tail is now wagging the dog. The companies are now telling government what they're going to be doing. So the next step beyond AI, we've got future tech. Autonomous robots are already here. This was NBC. Now, again, this was 2014. A lot was happening in those, after that dot-com bust. A lot of information was starting to come out by the mid 2010s, right? Samsung, of all companies, a lot of us have the Samsung Android phone, reveals Robot Sentry to keep an eye on North Korea. So what does that mean? Again, we're on this same page, we're up above, it mentions a little more detail. The robots work side by side with soldiers in the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, okay, here we go, 160-mile long, 2.5-mile wide strip separating South Korea from North Korea. So let's look at this. Do we have a border in the United States right now that we are concerned with? Absolutely we do. Can you imagine if our tech companies who have been funded by DARPA, who over recent years have chosen one political viewpoint and governing authority over another, can you imagine if these are the ones responsible for putting the software, meaning programming, telling these piles of metal how to rise up and act against human beings? So this NBC News article, Future Tech, autonomous robots already here. Again, I did skip that word. While experts debate on the ethics of autonomous K robots, militaries are already testing them, and they're funded by companies that you are using every day by buying the product and supporting them. May 14th, 2014, UN officials, scientists, and activists have gathered this week to debate a not so distant tomorrow filled with autonomous robot warriors. But machines that can kill without human guidance are already here. In fact, they are already being tested by militaries across the world. This week's talks in Geneva are the beginning of a debate over whether autonomous lethal systems will eventually be banned under the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, CCW. Well, that's a weird name. Some of the robots, they're just prototypes. That's all we're doing. We're just kind of messing around, taking a few university students, maybe a little DARPA funding, that's it. But others, like Sentry robots installed by South Korea and Israel, have the ability to kill anonymously. Oh, of course they don't worry about it. As the technology gets more advanced, some officials are worried that stories about Terminator-style robots might slow the adaptation of machines that could save lives of the soldiers. So what we've got are, I never saw the actual images posted openly. I have seen them in FOIA documents, but essentially these are robots. They don't have legs. They're not going to chase after you, at least the Samsung ones that I saw modeled. They sit on kind of like a wall-like structure. However, they're not taught to see, oh, does that person need help? Perhaps that they're lost. They're not taught to have any sort of a feeling or emotion. They are taught if there's an individual within their parameters, that individual is not to be there. They are to be removed from this planet. There is no second guessing or emotion. This is how they're programmed. And who is programming that? And where's the information coming from? Again, there's a lot of core companies that are mentioned in here. We, of course, have Microsoft Connect. We have Northrop Grumman's. We've got Tyrannus out of the UK. We've got BAE Systems, you name it. All these major corporations are funding such research and technology that are only here to help us. So let's move forward here. As we talk about the master slave and fight over offensive computer terms, we learn a little bit more about the programming of computers. Now, if you were to go into a degree program to, let's say, program autonomous vehicles, there's a lot of different scenarios that are taught. We've all heard of the train scenario or the train dilemma, or the trolley dilemma, I guess is how it's more properly called, where a trolley is going down the road and it can either, there's something in its way and it either harms those individuals in its way, or it diverts off and it harms another group and or individual, and which individuals have a more of a right to life, because if it does successfully slam on its brakes and secure and stop, then the individuals inside are sure to be harmed. So you've got essentially group A, group B, and group C going here. So if you were to program autonomous vehicles, essentially you're using a 3D matrix and you're programming mathematical terms into this matrix. Once the core programming is put in, then you're going to go through decision trees. What if the car does this and this happens? How should it interact? So it's, just step-by-step training. Now, what you might like in it too is if you've had a child or you've seen a child, maybe somebody that's baby to toddler, the toddler didn't just stand up one day and start walking and that's the life, right? It doesn't come out of the mom walking, and that's not the way humans are. It takes some training, some patience. There's a lot of standing and falling and uneasy steps. The bones haven't fully formed, not an understanding of what to use with them. Often there's some kind of a muscle building that happens. So a pull up, a push up, leaning on a wall or a table. Some children have a scooter to walk with for a little while. And then eventually, once that's mastered, they get into understanding walking and balance. They may have balance bikes. They may be able to now balance on two wheels. As you can see, it's a step-by-step process. As you're training a robot, we've all seen the scenario of making a peanut butter sandwich. If you ask somebody to make a peanut butter sandwich, there's a lot of understanding about what a knife is, what a bread is, what a jar is, how a jar works, what the lid is in relationship to the jar, in relationship to the consistency of the items inside, where the items might be kept in the kitchen. There's a lot of details that go into that. But if you tell a robot, really, you cannot skip a step because every step matters. Well, once we have these core steps of programming an autonomous vehicle, then machine learning will kick in, and that's typically via what we know as simulations. So we take the core idea, we run the vehicles, and then we run software programs that'll say, if this scenario that happened in the real world on a real road it happened, they'd upload that in and they'd say, well, what if this happened or this happened or this happened or this happened? And every situation that they possibly could would be run in order to train the vehicle to start creating its own solutions. But the training still has the core of who programmed it. Was it programmed that when it stands and rises, it runs to its mom and it's rewarded with a hug and a kiss? Or was it when it stands and runs, it had better get out of there because of the attacks it'll get from its parents, a dog, a sibling? There's different programming that occurs in humans, and that core programming that goes into robots is going to take them on their path as well. So there was a big conversation a few years ago that came up with the core terms that are used within computing. Now, this is not throughout the industry. In fact, none of the programming environments that I have been involved with has used this. In fact, typically the common is parent and child relationship, but there are some organizations that have been pointed out for calling this. And as cancel culture moves forward, there's quite a bit of concern over what this relationship is. So here we have a New York Times article, and this came up. Oh, this is really interesting. This one's coming up from 1956, different type. Okay, let's see here. Go back to this New York Times article that we pulled up. So this what came up 2 days ago, master slave and the fight over offensive terms in computing. Nearly a year after the Internet Engineering Task Force took up the plan to replace words that could be considered racist, the debate is still raging. Now, if the language used in order to refer to the relationships of software within a programming, you can just imagine the mindset within the programming that would either protect, defend, you know what that computer is, the choices it's going to make. So here, Kate Conger released an article. Anyone who joined a video call during the pandemic probably has a global volunteer organization called the Internet Engineering Task Force to thank for making the technology work. The group, which helped create the technical foundations of the internet, designed the language that allows most video to run smoothly online. It made it possible for someone with a Gmail account to communicate with a friend who uses Yahoo, and for shoppers to safely enter their credit card information on e-commerce sites. Now the organization is tackling an even thornier issue, getting rid of computer engineering terms that evoke racist history like master slave, whitelist, and blacklist. And these are very, very common. So if you want to read more about this task force, you certainly can do so. But the reality is whoever, in law, there's a concept, whoever writes the contract wins, because the other person is just either you sign it or you don't. And if you don't, in most cases, you don't understand it all the way. But if you don't, then you don't participate. And if you were to participate in the writing of the contract, then it's usually more bilateral, which means two parties, versus unilateral, one party directing the other party. So this is a very, very serious situation as we move away from a computer sitting on your desk with no arms and legs to a computer at a border that may or may not be mobile at that point, but has a decision tree of removing the life of a human on this planet. And at some point, you know, that's going to at the least have wheels, if not also arms and legs as well. So again, I want to keep each of these rather short, so we're going to cut this one off here. We started off with DARPA tapping Blue Origin, a private company with a nuclear-powered rocket. We looked into what DARPA is, the grand challenge, artificial intelligence, and machine learning in segment 1. In segment 2, we looked at DARPA. Well, there's the name again, popping up on Facebook, how it's driving social media platforms, affecting you directly. And now this next issue we're going to talk about is how these programmed computers specifically relate to you in your life. All right, catch you soon.